Hey everyone, Fina here from Fina Reads, and welcome back to another episode of Book Ramblings. Before I dive into this topic, I want to pre-announce is probably better because I'm actually planning to create actual announcement videos for that. So this is a pre-announcement of what is coming up in my channel. About 2 weeks ago, Philip, Bryce, Ursi, Ben, and I had a conversation about women authors. First of all, I had a lot of fun talking with this group and generally chatting with those folks about female authors and, what is all out there and what amazing books and stories women authors bring to the table. So it was a really great conversation. Not so great for my credit card because so many of the books that we talked about in the group, I ended up, grabbing afterwards because they just sounded amazing. And then second of all, once it went live, the comments were really interesting. There was a lot of interaction on Philip's video. There were a lot of people adding more authors that they enjoyed to the list of authors we already had. And I just thought that was such a great way of approaching this topic. And I thought about what would be an interesting way of being able to talk more about these things. What are all the things that make this world so colorful? We should more often have a chance to share our favorite books, our favorite authors that write about something that belongs to any of those various topics, from not just female authors or male authors, but also Asian inspiration in books, or we can talk about banned books or mental health representation in books. I started putting together some thoughts. I started reaching out to a handful of people already to get initial videos set up. And we're kicking it off. It's currently looking like April 23rd. Actually not with a specific topic, but that was kind of a last minute change with the question that was brought up by Chaz and Philip earlier today during their chatting with friends conversation that those two had over on Chaz's channel. I'm linking that down below. I was like, you know what? I actually like this question a lot. So I reached out to them and asked if they would be interested to kick this whole series off with me. And it looks like we agreed on April 23rd for that day. But more on that to come. And the second project that I'm currently planning on and that I will hopefully be able to kick off soon is round 2 of the Sisterhood of the Traveling Book Box. All right, that's it with pre-announcement. Let's talk about the books that I've read over the last 2 weeks because that's what we're actually here for. The book that I literally read over the last 2 weeks was Dragon of Jin-Sayeng, which is book 3 in the Chronicles of the Bitch Queen. I'm done with the series. And overall, the entire series, with the first book being Wolf of Oren-Yaru, the second book, The Ikusar Falcon, and then the third book, The Dragon of Jin-Sayeng. Overall, I think it's a really interesting series that brings something new to the table in the fantasy world for several reasons. One is it's written from a first-person perspective, from a strong female character, and pretty early on in the story you learn, she's queen, right? So everybody's expecting her to be strong, but she actually isn't. And she deals with a lot of self-doubt, a lot of pressure from her warlords that, own the different countries in her empire and that together with her govern the country. The way K.S. Veloso wrote her story had a huge impact on me. As a woman who has to be strong in her job and who has to push others to get stuff done and, just lead certain projects, all those kind of things, there were situations where I found myself in the book. And it was really incredible to see that this was a main character who kept struggling, who had good and bad sides, who made good and bad decisions, just like a normal person would, right? Not everything is good in the world. Not everything is bad in the world. A person makes certain decisions based on their life experience and based on what other circumstances that are happening. And she did an amazing job portraying the main character in that way and showing what she had to go through in her life. Her family relationships were not great, and there's a lot of what's happening in those stories over the 3 books is because she has her ways that she got taught so ingrained in her, and she made certain decisions because of that where everybody else told her, don't do that. And that was also really well done. Then, of course, there's a lot of political intrigue and backstabbing and a twist behind a twist behind a twist and all those kind of things. And all that was also very well done. The way the ending then was spun was actually really good. Here's the but. It was too long. The first half of book 3 is essentially a reiteration of book 2. Not that the author repeated anything from book 2. It is the continuation of the story, but it was the same thing. Like, it was the same mechanism, plot mechanism, if you will, that happened over and over again. And that just got boring after some time, because this is 600 pages. Book 2 is also 600 pages. So I already read 600 pages of that same, oh, we are going in that direction. No, now we're going in that direction. No, now we're going again in that direction. And the first 300 pages did the same thing again. And I was just like, that was just a bit too much. Book 2 could have been easily 100, 200 pages shorter. This book could have been half, and then you could have made it a duology, I think. It was just a little bit too drawn out. But besides that, I really loved the writing. I really loved the way she told the story of Queen Talian, our main character. I loved all the characters that she was surrounded by. Know something, though. If you read book 1 and you're about halfway through and you cannot deal with the main character, because I can see that happening, she's very specific. If you cannot deal with her, just don't read the series, because the rest of the series is exactly the same. And the way this main character is the way she is throughout all 3 books. Also, and maybe that was my mistake, maybe that's why I think book 3 is kind of a little bit drawn out, is it's not a good series to binge read, and that's what I did. So if you do not want to binge read it, there are sections here, and I don't want to show it too much because of spoilers, where she summarizes what happened before, so you could have a longer break between the books and pick it up without rereading anything. And I think that would have been better, because then I would have had a longer break after book 2 and after everything that happened there, and would be excited again about the way she told the story, because it was good. All those twists and turns were really great. It was just too much at the end, and I was just sitting there 300 pages in. I was like, oh, come on, can we just finish this out now? And that's not good. You don't want that in your book, right? You really don't want that. So yes, I still highly recommend it. I still think it's an amazing series. The whole series together is probably more towards a 4-star than a 5-star for me right now. I'm still glad I read it. I'm still excited about it. And I definitely still want to pick up her other trilogy that I already have here anyway. So, so to break up this long chunker, I needed a few breaks in between. So I picked up a couple of shorter stories. One was The Tiger Came to the Mountains by, and I have to look this up, Silvia Moreno Garcia, which is the first book in another Amazon short story collection called the Trespass Collection. And you might have seen that before. There was the Forward Collection, then there was one with fairy tale retellings, and I think a more crime mystery thriller one. So Amazon has a bunch of short story collections. They are all books between 20 and 80 pages. And if you're a Prime member, you can download them for free, or borrow them for free, rather. That was a short story set in Mexico. It had a little bit historical fiction, a little bit magical realism / fantasy in there. And it was a short story just about a young woman that has to hide from soldiers in a cave and then has to defend her brother that is with her from a tiger. And it's just the most beautiful writing. It is so atmospheric. I really loved what she was able to set up in 22 or something pages. And it was heartwarming. It was wholesome. And I loved it. So I definitely want to read the other short stories from that collection. And just in case you didn't know, Silvia Moreno Garcia is the author of actually a lot of really known books like Mexican Gothic, The Beautiful Ones, Certain Dark Things, etc. So that definitely made me look at her, because I've heard of those books, but I've never picked them up before. But that short story, and I mean, let's face it, that's the whole point of that short story collection. That short story made me look at her other works and pick some up to read again, because that prose, that writing, the way, she used words to create the atmosphere of that short story was just really well done. And I loved every minute of it. Another book that I read, and that was one that we talked about in the conversation we had with Philip, Ursi, Bryce, and Ben around women writers, was 10 Days in a Madhouse by Nellie Bly. And Ursi actually read that in February as part of February She Wrote. And that was one of the many books that I picked up after that collection. And because it is such a nice short thing, As you can see, I read that pretty much in one swoop through because I find non-fiction stories around psychiatric wards and psychology and how people deal with mental illnesses and how our system sometimes, in this case, pretty badly messes up. I was all over this book. So I really ate it up what Ursi was saying about it, and I was like, okay, I have to read it myself. It's just, this stuff is something that I enjoy reading. Sounds wrong because it's not an enjoyment reading. It's more, I'm really interested in this topic. Really short. It's 100 pages, if at all. You don't have to buy the paperback of that. I think you can get this text for free. And it's essentially a collection of newspaper articles because she was a journalist back then. And her project was to be called insane and then moved into a madhouse to Blackwell Island, which was a psychiatric ward. I apologize, it's a really hard word. But after 10 days, she was supposed to get out of it again, and her colleague was pulled her out again. And she's describing those 10 days in that ward, and it's ridiculous how the people are treated in there. I mean, it's not even, there's nothing funny about it. It's horrendous. And yeah, I had my moments while reading that, and yes, this was 1887. I read some short summaries afterwards, and Ursi talked about that as well in Philip's video, like in our conversation that we had. Things have changed since then. Now I'm excited though. There's another book called The Great Pretender. Similar premise where like a woman that is feigning insanity, even though she is perfectly fine. Not saying that people with mental health issues are not perfectly fine. That's not what I'm saying, right? But she doesn't have any mental health issues, but she's pretending to have them. You know, is moved into a psychiatric ward as well. And that was late 1990s, I think, is when that book was written, based on an experiment someone did in the 1970s. And those results are not that great either. So now I'm curious to read that other book, The Great Pretender, and compare the situation basically 100 years later. And then I continued with a book, which is Cory Doctorow's Radicalized. I don't remember, did I finish The Unauthorized Bread the last time, or did I just start it? I'm not 100% sure anymore, but I finished it since then. And then, which was about a short story about capitalism. And like the whole purpose of these short stories is to, in a kind of sarcastic way, point out societal issues. The first one was capitalism. The second one, which is called Model Minority, and that's where I'm about halfway through, is about racism. He really has a way with words. It's an interesting way to point out the issues that we're having and why we're having them. So definitely interesting short story. I like the way he's writing it. I'm excited to see how the other two, Radicalized and The Mask of the Red Death, continue. So Radicalized is about health insurance issues in America, and Mask of Red Death is, I think, environment issues. More to come once I'm done. And then the other one that I've started is, which book is missing? What series do I talk about in every video? Huh? What series is missing? Well, of course, Green Rider was missing. So I started with book 3 in the Green Rider series, which is High King's Tomb, on audiobook again. And because I had some things at work last week where I didn't need too much brain power, so while I was staring at Excel spreadsheets, I started listening to that. I think I'm about like 23% in, but I have all April to finish it, and we are going to have our live show probably April 30th or May 1st. We're still picking an exact date. The read along continues. More people are now picking up or finishing First Writer's Call. More people have been picking up High King's Tomb. So there are discussions happening, and people are realizing that it's getting darker and it's not all rainbows and unicorns anymore. Which leaves me with 2 books for the rest of March, since we have about a week left. I have a little bit time to finish, or well, start and finish Running Man, which is Jake's and my buddy read for Richard Bachman in March. I'm still excited about it because I think I talked about it the last time that I've watched the movie, but I've never read the book. I'm excited to finally read the book and to experience that. The only thing I know is it's not exactly like the movie. It's quite different from what I know. So I'm excited to see how different and what exactly is different. And the last book that I'm at least planning on starting in March is The Rune of Kings by Jen Lyons. There's actually a read-along going on in the Shelf Space server over on Discord, which I was planning on reading anyway. And then by accident at the same time, they had a read-along and they started reading that in March. And at least I'd like to get started so I can see if I want to continue with that series in April and so on. And I think book 5 is coming out in 5 months. So I think they timed it on the Shelf Space server. They timed it exactly the way that they can read one book per month till the new book comes out. I hope there were some interesting books that I talked about. Definitely let me know your thoughts down below if you've read any of those or if you're interested in picking any of those up. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!